Philalitea, and I keep telling myself, maybe I even keep telling you, that I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go live when I'm just walking around. And so I made some shorts just now, and you probably know the story if you follow the shorts, and if you've never seen me before, you haven't heard the story. So I've been without cigarettes, and for me, they were part of the religious expression. I I have asked for God during my homelessness, as an ascetic, as a religious person, that God keep me stocked up in nicotine and THC. Doesn't seem like a lot to ask, to spread his word and his message, and to try, if not to get back to good with God, because I'm not sure we were ever good with God. There's no evidence we were ever good with God. And so God wanted me, he gave me a vision, okay? I don't talk like this often, but I'm wearing the hood. I've got the blue scarf out. Let's talk. My legs are getting tired now because, walking a little bit. I don't know how to talk about visionary experiences because I do not have visionary experiences often. I was in church and he was talking about Luke and about having a personal relationship with God and about giving your life over to the message and the word and the behavior that is expected of the religious person, because everybody in church has volunteered to the religious life, and that there are requirements. There are specific things that's asked of you from that. And I'm gonna turn the camera. And as I'm sitting there, I'm meditating on listening to him, but I'm keeping my thoughts empty. I'm doing the Zen style meditation where literally keeping my thoughts empty, and I'm just looking at the cross. And then instead of seeing the cross, I saw an ancient ritual asking for the same things that I ask for every day: the appropriate weather, the appropriate food. And so, like, this idea that God provides directly the food that we eat, this comes to us from an ancient place of having to find your food every day, right? And so that's a hunter-gatherer God. And so I don't know that we were ever right with God in the way that we weren't constantly doing things as individuals to make God not do what we want from him, because that's how will magic works. And I think that what I saw is what I know to be true. And so I wasn't shown something that I'd never thought about before, and I've been writing about that. You'll see that in a month or two or longer in the Patreon. But I've been really meditating on the idiom novel thought, new thoughts. And I think that I know that philosophy in the 1800s and the early 1900s was obsessed with new thoughts, thinking new things that no one had ever thought before. And I don't think, I know that there was a time in human history where humans thought things that no one had ever thought before. And that time was relatively recent in human history. We're talking about maybe 13,000 years ago is when thought began in a real kind of way. When you're talking about I spend a lot of time meditating and casting my mind backward, taking what I know and moving it back and back and back and back, and until it's hard to describe and it's hard to explain, but it's I don't know. It's a modeling. I make models, four-dimensional models of time and human behavior in time, and then you can move them backward and see what stays and what must have changed. You can start to tease out knots in history, things that didn't get captured in the books. You can start to really work between the words, as they say, or between the lines, right? And what I know to be true is that for most of the 250,000 or 300,000 years of Homo sapien history, I have friends who care deeply about alternative history and writers and thinkers like Graham Hancock, who only read things from the 1800s. So they have this idea that the only way they can actually come to the truth is to say something that nobody's ever said before, to have novel thoughts. And so they're necessarily wrong because they're assuming that things have to be different than how we've understood them to be in the past, that they can't be like how we've understood them or how we currently understand them to be. And so I take the opposite approach and I say, okay, well, it's got to be similar. It has to be similar because, for example, technology is radically different between now and the 1950s, but humans were still human in the 1950s. The modus operandi, right? The sort of an inquisition that you can do to ask, like, okay, well, why do people behave the way they do? You can go through that same pattern, right? You can go through that's why they call historical investigations or whatever. That's why they literally will call it like, oh, it's an ancient detective story or whatever, because you can use the skills that have been developed to fight crime, right? You can use those same skills to do history effectively. And so what I was shown is that the giver, that the sort of rule of two of the Sith in Star Wars, that's just how things were done for hundreds of thousands of years. There was a male and a female who knew basically everything that needed to be known in order to make good decisions for the extended family group of what we now call the tribe. And everybody else was not clued in. Nobody else needed to be clued in on the gods. And so you would go to these people who were semi-professionals with questions about the gods. And man, things got fucked up when the tribe became a city and family groups wanted to monopolize and control the resources of the people. And so I don't know that we've ever come up with a system that actually satisfies God first. I think that every civilization that tried was ultimately trying to satisfy the families at the top of the civilization, because the families at the top of the civilization all claimed to be seeded by those Sith type gods, is what they would have been several 4 or 5 generations later. People like Ezekiel, like, this is why they get captured up in this tradition, because that tradition had been going on since the Ice Age melted. You understand? because that tradition glued everything together. And so now we have a situation where we have a general populace who are too educated, but also too stupid, broadly too dumb to make decisions without someone who's actually close to and in personal communication with the greater God. Because there is a very real anxiety that you, people not me, have about, well, am I doing what God wants? Am I following the plan? Right? Okay, so now we're back to how I know I'm following the plan. I know that I am who God wants me to be. How do I know? Because I've put my life in His hands and I said the only paycheck that I require is cigarettes and weed. And what have I done? I've gone one day without cigarettes and fucking 3 months of homelessness. That's pretty impressive. That's actually impressive. I've talked to other homeless people who are like, that's actually difficult to do. It is actually difficult to do. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm saying that what I've been telling you is that you gotta stop chasing the reward. What I wrote about today is it's about placation. I am seeking placation. Why? Because placation comes from the Latin word which effectively meant please but not pleasure. The only people who were placated in the ancient world, especially the deep ancient world, like what I'm talking about from my vision, the only people who were placated were gods. And I talked about that earlier when I said that the reason that tradition is a religious expression is because the only people who had anything nice made for them were the gods. And so what had to happen is if you're a female and you want to wear nice clothes in the deep ancient world, is you have to be recognized as a goddess. And so what they did, the way people got themselves recognized as goddesses, gods and goddesses, it wasn't only women who wanted nice things, men wanted nice things too, is they convinced the regular people that, well, they represent the gods. So religion was already extremely complex and extremely sophisticated. It already understood itself extremely well when it needed to go into self-preservation mode because people were getting independently and individually rich. The Torah explains this. It just does it without wanting to make that the whole story, because the Torah, the first 5 books, we call it the first 5, they're the last 5 that were written. They were the last 5 that were written, and they were put first because the idea was to have you thinking about and understanding history in a specific way before you looked back to the old books. Because the old books are not speaking to the future. And so like me right now, like talking to the future right now, means that I have to date and I have to place myself. I have to put myself in specific contexts. Because if I don't, nothing that I'm saying is actionable. Because you have to understand the context when a situation is appropriate, or when a reaction to, you have to know the situation in order to know when the response to the situation is appropriate, or what response is appropriate to the situation. In other words, you either have to be educated, trained, or you have to have run the simulations for yourself. And that's not easy. First of all, it takes a huge amount of cognitive effort and energy, which requires a huge amount of calories, in fact. And it may or may not, you can ask the early medieval Muslims. You may or may not need stimulants in order to do what I'm doing, which means you may or may not need caffeine and nicotine. I'm not trying to say that I need Ritalin or that I need meth. Most certainly not. But I don't think that God provided us chemicals, natural plants, that allow us to do what he asks us to do a little bit easier and for a little bit longer, because they fuel the process like THC does, with opening my mouth so that I care a little bit less about hurting your feelings. Which also, it does open my mind so much that sometimes it's very difficult to hold on to a sequential thought. So I'm certain that listening back to this is going to be like, wow, that was a lot of information. All of my videos are like that, but I've realized what that is and where I got that from. That's a very, very high-end coaching technique. That's a late-stage coaching technique. And I know I didn't pick it up from this person, but I would have picked it up from my father from the military. But I have a name for it. I have to go back and listen to and talk about it again for the name, because I didn't quite catch it. But I was listening to Nick Saban talk to Pat McAfee last week or the week before. And he said something that resonated all the way with me. And he says that what he does, the way he coaches, is he doesn't coach simple. Because if you teach people simple, they'll only be able to think simple. So if you teach people one thing at a time until they have it perfected and mastered, they'll only be able to think about that thing in the context of that thing. And in football, you're not doing one thing at a time, ever. There's always multiple things, sometimes information overload so that you actually can't think. What they actually say is the best players don't think. They just let their bodies play. And the only way you can do that is if you've done, like I said, the simulations, you were trained or you were educated. And so what he does is, instead of coaching simple, he and I take the same approach. He just put it in a way that I never could. And he says that what he does is he takes all the shit that he wants you to learn and he puts it all in one bucket, and then he throws that bucket at you. And he sees what sticks to the walls of your mind, and then he has you clean up what didn't, and then he has you throw the bucket at the wall of your mind until there's nothing left in that bucket. And then he comes back with a new bucket of shit he wants you to learn, and the process starts over. Why? He said that he needs you to be able to take in all that information because he needs you to be able to take in all that information. The college season isn't long enough for them to be able to coach and coach and coach and coach like in the NFL. But more importantly, he also said, like I said, you're not doing only one thing on the field. So you need to be able to take in and process a huge amount of information all at once. The people who can do that are the people who are successful. And that's not only football. I'm turning myself around. That's not only in football. I'm serious. Athletics are proxy war. So everything that works on the combat field works on the athletic field. Everything that works on the athletic field works in finance. Everything that works to win works to win, always. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And so being able to pick up and process a lot of information is hugely beneficial to you. So when I'm doing this and I'm all over the place and I'm showing you all these different things that you need to know, you got to understand, I'm confident that you can pick it up and that this is the right way to do it, because I was a world-class trainer and manager when I did it. I was not paid and I was not recognized as such, but I was the best there will ever be. I don't believe that, but I was fucking good. I was fucking good. I hired a girl when I was working front of house when I was managing front of house at a mom and pop. I hired a girl with no service experience. And she said she wanted to learn it because she wanted to do it. I asked her, I was like, why'd you even apply for a service job? And she says, well, I want to learn it. It seems like a good skill to have, to be able to wait tables. It seems like the kind of thing that can translate anywhere you want to live in the world. And I said, I'll show you how it's done. And so the owner, she didn't understand. But what I did with her, I'm not going to say her name. If she ever finds that I'm doing this, she'll know who she is. The owner used to get so mad at me because what I would do is I would stand in her section with her, and I would let her tables see me standing in her section with her, and then I would just talk to her about service and about the important things that you need to do, the mindset that you need to have. But more importantly, I would let her tables see her being coached up, and then I would do like a nod or a nudge, or I would indicate to her that she needed to be doing something, and she would go and do it, and then she would come back and stand with me, and I would talk to her about the headspace of being in service and all of this. And she was my top earner for a long time. She killed it. And it wasn't just because when I set her free and I wasn't standing with her anymore and I wasn't talking to her, she just did what I taught her to do. And that's stand on your downtime where your tables can see you seeing them. Mother hen your tables, and they love that shit, because even if they don't need anything, they know that you know that they don't need anything, and that you're being vigilant, that you're not fucking off playing around on your phone or whatever. So what works always works. Having your head in the game always works. Always. It doesn't matter what industry you're working in. It doesn't have to be about waiting tables. It doesn't have to be about standing in front of a register, but having your head in the game, it matters. It matters. I'm almost home. I'll let you see what I see. I love this. Yeah, it's low key like a horror movie, but there it is. This is where those kids picked up those rocks. I assume it was kids, but there were a bunch of rocks up here that they just tossed down there. I might be wrong about that. I don't see any rocks that size up here. They might have. No, there's one. I was about to say, they might have gone looking for those rocks even. Whatever. Not worried about it. I'm not malicious, not vengeful, and I have forgiven them. It rained like crazy today, so pray with me that my tent is safe and dry, and that nobody wants to bother me. I was thinking there was something from Dollar General, Dollar Tree that I might want, but I don't remember what it could be. So, must not. What I love about this is how close I am to civilization. I mean, you just saw me walking through a mall parking lot, and then I'm just in the woods now. I'm just in the woods now. Alone, except for the potentially hundreds of people just above that wall. All right, well, I'm home and I have to pee, so I'm not going to put you through having to watch me pee. Thank you for walking home with me. Makes me feel safer. You'll hear from me again.